There. And I am going to read Ezekiel 47, 1 to 12. And I'm hearing an echo, but I hope that's not true for everyone else. Not now. And I understand this is a piece that would begin the meetings when the original group would be together with Augsburg, who started, who others will explain better how it all got started. But this is a piece from Ezekiel that would be a meditative piece to begin the meetings. When he brought me back to the entrance of the temple, there, water was flowing from below the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. And the water was flowing down from below the south end of the threshold of the temple, south of the altar. Then he brought me out by way of the north gate and led me around on the outside to the outer gate that faces toward the east. And the water was coming out on the south side. Going on eastward with a cord in his hand, the man measured 1,000 cubits and then led me through the water, and it was ankle deep. Again, he measured 1,000 and led me through the water, and it was knee deep. Again, he measured 1,000 and led me through the water, and it was up to the waist. Again, he measured 1,000, and it was a river that I could not cross, for the water had risen. It was deep enough to swim in, a river that could not be crossed. He said to me, "Mortal, have you seen this?" Then he led me back along the bank of the river. As I came back, I saw on the bank of the river a great many trees on the one side and on the other. He said to me, "This water flows toward the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah. And when it enters the sea of stagnant waters, the water will become fresh. Wherever the river goes, every living creature that swarms will live, and there will be very many fish. Once these waters reach there, it will become fresh, and everything will live where the river goes. People will stand fishing beside the sea, from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim, and will be a place for the spreading of nets. Its fish will be of a great many kinds, like the fish of the great sea. But its swamps and marshes will not become fresh. They are to be left for salt. On the banks on both sides of the river, there will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, nor their fruit fail, but they will bear fresh fruit every month, because the water for them flows from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing."
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, so we would read this passage before a lot of our meetings and talk about what it was that we heard in the reading this time. It was particularly powerful because it felt like every time we would read it, something else would stand out. And so we wanted to kind of honor that tradition and come back to that.
Should I go on to the next slide?
Yeah.
So part of our story of how all of this began was we as a faith community entered into a covenant with Augsburg Riverside Innovation Hub, and we put together an application to just enter into that relationship. And that was a lot of work just to do that part of the process. And once we had submitted our application to say that we were going to commit to being part and learning how to be a public church, we had to then begin a process. So some of us might think very linearly, and this was definitely a process with a lot of work, and we had to formulate a team of people to begin the work of learning what is accompaniment, what is interpretation, what does that mean, and we'll revisit that. After a year of working with a coach, a young adult coach from Augsburg, we actually found ourselves in a place where we had taken what we had learned from our neighborhood and those surrounding our worship space, our building, and did some work around what's called discernment, and then kind of figured out, what are we going to do with all this? What is God calling us to do? At that point, that's when we had to formulate a grant proposal, and spent a full day presenting our grant proposal. It was very scary. I don't know why, but it felt very formal, that there was a lot of intentional work that had to be done. Felt like we're in college. We're doing our, getting our PhD or something, or maybe not PhD yet. But I had to kind of prove that we were worthy of receiving a grant to become a hub for public church framework. And once we completed the grant, we had to then begin the work. And the work went from August to August, and so from 2019 to 2020. Part of that work is evident on our the front lawn, which is the picnic table and the chairs, becoming a hub, a spiritual hub for the community. Part of the work was to continue to look around on what is on the outside of our building. Who are we? Where's God at work surrounding us? And how do we respond to that as a faith community and become part of those relationships? And after much work during when we were able, between 2019 and 2020, workshops and hosting workshops for the neighborhood and for others, and we did an assessment at the end of our first year of work. So we had to basically get approved again for the second half of our grant, which then led us into our second year of work. We were able to do just a couple things as part of that second year of work. Did at least, I think we did 2 workshops, and created some infrastructure as well for a website and ways of connecting with the neighborhood. Then COVID hit. So that's when we had to kind of reimagine, how are we going to live out the second year of this, of what we had committed to doing, of what we had proposed, how to continue this work. And that showed up in how we did the Peace Day gathering, and how we did the giving trees, and currently still doing the ice cream Saturdays. I was going to say, it used to be ice cream Sundays, but ice cream Saturdays. Ways that we continued figuring out new ways to continue the work that we had promised that we would do, and the reason why we received money from the Innovation Hub. And with that, everything, and I'm doing this very quickly. You have to understand with each of these years, there was a lot of intensive work that happened, like the reading we just did, and going over that and learning how to listen to God, and how to listen to God in other places than in our building. And so now we've had these 2 years of a granting process where we were given money to basically utilize to see what can we do as a faith community to really become part of the public church framework, and how can we also see where are young adults in that world. And now we're headed into a space where we're no longer funded by the grant, but that what we have learned and what we have been given as a gift to being more than just a faith community that lives within inside four walls. As we know, through COVID, we've all had to live differently, and we've had to pivot, and the world has changed. We've had to basically, I think the whole world has had to rethink of who we are, where is God in all of this, and where do we show up, and how do we show up. And that's kind of where we're at moving into 2022, is reimagining again, going back to the beginning of accompaniment, to start the cycle again. So the process is not linear. The process of becoming a public church is very circular, and sometimes it goes back and forth to different places. So, and Larry, I think, is going to say more about that. But just to have an understanding of kind of the timeline is maybe helpful to understand how big this work has been, and different people have been part of it along the way. Our team of people who have been part of this has changed throughout all this time. There have been different people who have come and gone. Fiona and I are probably the first we're at the very, very beginning of this process. Some people have come and gone and moved elsewhere. So we are looking at a new beginning as we enter this summer and into the fall. And so, and just another perspective of kind of how this was organized. So the Lilly Endowment had done some research and figured out that churches were dying. Churches were not encouraging that things, the world was changing, and where faith communities, how they operated, where they showed up, was changing. And so the river, they came up with a granting process in order to give institutions money to create a process to enable other smaller faith communities. So for example, Lilly Endowment had money. They gave it, Riverside Innovation Hub Augsburg applied for a grant through the Lilly Endowment, along with the 11 other institutions, which are all over the United States. Riverside Innovation Hub then took their money and offered up a granting or a process for people to potentially apply for a grant. And there were 24 other faith communities that participated in that, St. Luke and James being one of them. We were the only Episcopal church that participated fully in it. There was St. Matthew's participated, but at a different level and did not continue. So we really were the only ones. to participate in that. Then when we received the grant, that's when we started the ice cream sundaes, developing what we call the front porch, the space under the tree, and creating the infrastructure for Peacecraft to be an outward visible sign to our neighborhood, and building relationships with the neighborhood through, most recently, what people may have experienced are the Giving Trees and Peace Day, the projects. So this is kind of hopefully a better example or a better way to kind of see the flow of where the money had come from, and that we were a part of something that was just much bigger than just us as a faith community. That we this is work that a lot of with every other institution that is doing this work. That means there's all these other hubs all over the country that are realizing that we need to start looking outside our walls to where God is showing up, and then we show up there and discern from there. Is that good, Fiona?
Yep.
Okay.
Sheila, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just curious, has anything been published to show what other faith communities have done? Just
Yep.
out of curiosity. You don't have to, say all of that now, but it would be interesting.
No, through the Riverside Innovation Hub through Augsburg are all the reports of all the other things. And then I think if you go to the Lilly Foundation website as well, then that would show what, through their reports would show, like the nationwide reports of all the other institutions.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to share a little bit here. There's some pictures here of a variety of things that show kind of the activities that Peacecraft and the Dream Team fostered and did with the funding from the hub, and how we looked and wanted to live out this dream. So you can see there's a picture of the front porch. So chairs were purchased, a table was purchased. There's a little chalkboard screen that comes out periodically. That was a welcoming to the neighborhood and to the community. And we've had, those of us who've been on the team have talked about how we have encountered our neighbors and had interesting conversations with them. From a St. James point of view, the first time I really heard about Peacecraft and the Dream Team was two ways. At the Peace Day celebration in 2019, I know that Ruth Ann and Tony and Cliff and Liz came to visit and see what was happening when we were all exploring togetherness back in 2019. And I also remember that when the St. James congregation invited the St. Luke's congregation to meet with us in our space, that Steve Richards got up and talked about the experiences, the workshops, the opportunities. And that was really the first time, other than hearing from Ruth Ann and Tony and Cliff and Liz, about what this might be and how I might get interested and excited in it. And of course, there were also meetings, and around the table, you could see a picture of some folks gathering around the table. And then, as Sheila pointed out, pandemic happened. And so I became part of a planning team, and we talked about what Peace Day was going to look like in view of our limited ability to connect with each other, which was another way to kind of bring a tradition from St. James. And you'll see the pictures of the peace flags that are hanging outside the church. And on our Peace Day in 2020, Neil Cuthbert and Louise Robinson provided the templates for wonderful art activities. And there were many people from St. James and St. Luke's and people from the community who came. It was a lovely afternoon. There was painting and talking, and also the ability to go one-on-one into the church and walk the labyrinth, which you can see a picture of, that was I think only the second or third time I'd ever been into the space, which allowed me to feel more part of the group. And then we got really involved in planning for Advent and Christmas, and we did our giving trees, which many of you participated in by donating, by giving us your prayers and your support. It was a great time for collegiality and for those of us in the Dream Team to get together on a nice or a very cold Saturday to decorate the trees. And I'm sorry, there's an airplane going overhead. And we all got excited about that. It was a wonderful experience. You can see there's somebody just jumping up and down for joy at the end. And we've continued to talk about, as Epiphany ended and the trees went away, what kind of things we were going to do. Decided the front porch was once again going to be really important, possibly looking at podcasts, which haven't yet happened really, but using the website to connect, and then offering ice cream Saturdays following our now in-person connections with each other. I think for me, as a person who joined this and the only current member of the team who's from the other congregation, the old congregation of St. James, it was a really good way for me to make connections with other people at St. Luke's and also to see what the neighborhood looks like. And I know yesterday we sat outside and passed out ice cream and water for dogs and had some conversations with people, and we'll continue to do that. But life in the Dream Team and the Peacecraft is an evolving scenario. And we're always interested and excited to have new people bring new ideas and energy. Thanks.
And I'll speak for a little while. I joined Peacecraft, I joined the Dream Team, which is the group that meets together. That's the name that we've given ourselves, in probably the summer of 2019. It was certainly before the first Peace meeting. First Peace Day in September, I think it is. And that was meeting by the Peace Pole, having some brief service of words, and then going on a walking tour, which we were joined, or as Rosemary said, we were fully engaged with people from St. James that were with us that day, and walked down to the Peace Garden. And so I joined this group because I am mostly involved, or had been mostly involved in, with the perspective of people who already walked into the church door and getting them involved in some activity like being a reader. And I wanted to be more aware of the community outside the church doors. And I knew that's what this group was, innovative. And so that has kept me involved. So the second year, as Rosemary well said, is we again had a Peace Day and had self-guided tours. Because of COVID, there are still booklets that are on the side of the portable church sign at the corner with Colfax and 46. There are still handout brochures to do a self-guided walking tour. And I look forward to see what's next. And I look forward to going back to the beginning that I wasn't a part of and understanding the four perspectives of being public church. Tom.
Yeah, I joined the Dream Team at the end of last year. The Giving Trees was really the first thing that I was involved with, but I've been a part of some pretty wonderful and amazing discussions that we've had, and I've also had the chance to participate in some of the interactions with Augsburg and the Riverside Innovation Hub and some of the other churches that have been a part of this. And it's been really, the dialogue with them has been really productive and caused us to think in some new and interesting ways about how our parish community overlaps with our geographic community. And one of the things that really that I took away from our last Augsburg meeting was the phrase transformative relationships. And that's kind of become a touchstone for me about this. Another phrase that I regularly use and try to frame things in as gospel-based, is that this is about sharing God's love and extending and opening and welcoming. And if there's some religion that goes along with that, that's wonderful as well. But it's about, learning who we're sharing space with and being more intentional and active about sharing that space and fostering those relationships. I come to church from the far east edge of St. Paul, so I know practically nothing about the neighborhood that we're in aside from how to get there. But it's there are things that we can do. I mean, it's amazing what's happened with the corner of 46th and Colfax and what we've been able to do just by intentionally making that space a common space, a shared space. And there's more things that we can do about finding out about what activities, what activism, what concerns are going on in our neighborhood, and becoming more involved in those things and extending outwards. So it's been a pretty amazing experience, and I see huge amounts of potential. And one thing that I don't feel like we've really mentioned enough yet is that anybody's welcome to come and talk and listen and participate and enjoy. And there's a lot of experience to be had from that. I encourage you to ask Sheila Foster about just some of the people she's bumped into, since she is at the church more regularly, certainly than I am. She has, just run into people and had conversations that, and has some really great stories to tell about it, and about the power of our own front yard. I'm not sure who I'm supposed to popcorn to at this point, or if I should say next slide.
Yeah, I think we're ready for the next one.
That's about all I've got, unless there's something I've forgotten.
We've been talking about the public church framework, and you've seen these words. I'm just going to say a bit about this. Part of the Augsburg work was really connected to the issue of how do we engage younger people, connect with younger people in the church. And my own perception is that younger people, and I'm thinking of my own kids, haven't removed themselves from church because of some theological or religious commitment or belief, but more because the church doesn't feel relevant to them in their lives. And so this Augsburg work is built around a theological framework, which is we've been talking about Dream Team and Peacecraft as a series of programs and activities, but it's also a process, and it's built on the idea that church has to happen in the public square. And our tradition has been that we in the church have a story. We hear the Great Commission to go out and preach the gospel, and we go out with a fully formed understanding of what the gospel and message and story is. And this really flips it on its head and looks at how we do that kind of work from an outside-in perspective. So it's a circular process that Sheila alluded to earlier that begins with accompaniment, which just means basically engaging with and getting out and engaging with and listening to our neighbors, connecting with our neighbors. We do this in lots of ways. St. James has a strong tradition of connecting with neighborhood groups and neighborhood programs. So this isn't a new activity, but being intentional about it may be something that is newer. And as we are out there, the next phase is interpreting, and sort of it's like, okay, well, let's hear these stories now through the lens of our faith, through the lens of our understanding of God's story. And in the process of doing that and hearing those stories, how do we see God calling us to connect with or work with or be with our neighbors? And that's really what discernment is about. And finally, any proclamation or good news or message comes out of that work of listening and interpreting and discerning. And it becomes a way that we look at the good news in word and deed with our neighbors instead of kind of at our neighbors. So I think it's a simple, intuitive process. Again, it's kind of an outside in. It begins with listening and not with proclamation. It begins with listening and discerning, and then from there, finding a way to share the good news that's relevant to our neighbors and their lives. That's the public church framework, and it's obviously something that fits for what Dream Team is doing, but it's also a process and framework that is broadly adaptable to anything we think about doing as a faith community.
Yeah, so now I'm going to talk about our future plans. So what we talked about is now that we're finishing up our grant process, that we want to start the cycle over again, especially now that we have, this combined church and that we're discovering each other and we're becoming a new place. So we want to begin again with the accompaniment phase. And when we went through this the first time, it was there's so many different ways that you can practice accompaniment. We did it by some of these examples on here, like we attended neighborhood events, neighborhood meetings of committees, neighborhood committees, or things like Open Streets Day on Lake Street. I went to a neighborhood meeting about the construction work on 35W and 94. There's so many different types of events. Some of them are, just informational, and some of them are just for fun. And we have sort of our own events that we create in order to have an accompaniment space, like our ice cream Saturdays. Like if we're trying to figure out how to open labyrinth days where we just leave the church doors open and let anybody come and use the labyrinth. And I think the point of this is really to hear what our neighbors are saying and not come into it with an agenda and not come into it with a sense of evangelism or doing market research or something. It's really just to listen, and we want to find where those listening posts are in our direct neighborhood. We live kind of in the corner of 4 different neighborhoods. We're in East Harriet. We're kind of near Tangletown and Kingfield. So there's several different neighborhoods surrounding us. And if one of the things we did a few years ago was we did a neighborhood walk. We just walked around, picked whatever blocks we wanted to walk around, and just observed, because, part of our neighborhood is the land and the nature. It's Lake Harriet and the Minnehaha watershed. So it's not just the people who are living next to us and the businesses that are nearby. So what we really want to do is continue this work. And I think it's important that we do this with as many people in our church as we can. I think this is an important process for our church to go through. And I think it's something that we all do in our own lives without even knowing it necessarily. And we do it in our own neighborhoods, and we do it in our church's neighborhood. So I think it'll be important to recognize where we're already doing that, and how we can use that information in those listening times and posts to better understand who we are and who our neighbors are. So I think we talked about going into breakout rooms. I don't think we have much time, so I wonder if we could just ask the group here what kind of ways that you might see that you already practice accompaniment in your own neighborhood or in our neighborhood by the church, and what are the kinds of things that you're hearing from that?
You know, Fiona, this is Bonnie LaDuca. As you were talking, and this is just maybe an idea, because I'm thinking of the little libraries that are all over the cities. And I like the idea of listening posts. And I was wondering if we could create some kind of box. We love boxes. And there could be a question that's posted, and it would change maybe weekly or every 2 weeks. And then people in the neighborhood or wherever the post is can write, you know, a question might be, what do you care about most in your neighborhood? Or just to get some input, you know, fresh streams of ideas. And I think it would take a while to build, but I think it might be interesting.
I like that. Yeah.
I like that too.
Yeah, Bonnie, this is Rosemary. You know, the community, the neighborhood is new to me living over here in Corcoran. But just yesterday having the ice cream Saturday, it would have been cool if that could be there when we're also connecting with people.
Yeah.
Because I think we have a richer connection than some of our connections yesterday were very rich, but it would be a way to find out where people are and what it is that they care about. So I think, Bonnie, I think that's a great idea.
And the other thing I was thinking too is it's a way for us to help facilitate the connections among the neighbors. So
Yes.
Mary Smith is really interested in all the litter that's everywhere. Someone else might be, and then we connect them. I mean, and then we're kind of we're like a hub to help not only the relationship with the neighbors, but the relationship among the neighbors.
I remember seeing something on Facebook some time back where there was a leading question to fill in the blank with an answer, and it was a wall that had chalkboard paint on it. And we certainly have a lot of chalk at church, many colors, but it was a message board that way where it would shout out at you. And especially if there's blanks left for you to add your own finisher.
Yeah.
So just a little unrelated, but I know there was a plan to put a library, a little free library box up with books on racial justice topics, and people were collecting books in that time. I don't know who was going to do that. Does anybody know anything about any progress on creating that?
I know I'm part of the roadblock on that because I volunteered to find plans for the library itself that kind of fit the needs based on sizes of books and height of people coming up to it and things like that. And my progress on that has been slow. So I already took a note in this meeting to a friendly reminder that I pretty well dropped the ball on that.
And we are already registered with as a little free library, read in color library.
Great.
But we just have to form the box and then get people to start getting the appropriate books for that.
Yeah, I got a collection to give to you when you're ready. But I think I love the Bonnie's idea, though. That would be so wonderful to have that kind of tool for the people who are there on Saturday morning.
I wanted to respond a little bit to the questions that are posted here. Try to be brief because we're out of time. How do I practice accompaniment in my own neighborhood? Is a powerful question, and I live in an old folks high rise, I call it, and I am accompanied by a lot of people here, and I try to accompany other people. I also, a big part of my neighborhood is a book group I belong to. I've belonged to for 40 years. And I try to listen to those people and accompany and follow the other steps, which I think are good. But the second question is, how could I practice accompaniment in the church's neighborhood? I want to challenge that. I don't live in that neighborhood, and I'm an outsider in that neighborhood. And I wonder, why should I practice accompaniment in that neighborhood? Why should I go down there or watch the Tom Erickson come in from the east side of St. Paul and sit and pretend that I'm a member of that community? That's a part that bothers me a lot.
Can I jump in on that?
Well,
Just,
give a quick one other question, which is my question. The term young adult has been used several times. Is that meaningful? The picture of the dream team doesn't look terribly young to me. The participants in this conversation, some are young, some are not. So I'm certainly not. What relevance does that have to what we're talking about?
I'll just jump in quickly, and I know we're almost out of time. As far as where people choose to practice accompaniment, I think that's a personal choice. So to your point, Tony, I think you powerfully described where you practice it. I also think there's value for the church located where it is to have people who are also willing to sort of hear what's happening around us in that space. So, but I think that's a completely personal choice where you practice accompaniment. And the second thing about I'm the one who brought up young adults because that was kind of the core of the Riverside Innovation Hub. I think our work is broader than that, and it's about the fact that there are a lot of young adults are kind of a logical group to say this about, but it's true for lots of people. People aren't connecting to the church because it doesn't feel relevant. So the work of accompaniment is all about trying to make connections that allow us to connect the story that we believe with people in their lives. So yeah, I wish we were attracting more young adults, but I think it's not just a young adult issue. So those are my thoughts on your questions.
I want to hop on the tail end of that and just say that personally, there's mention of young adults. I prefer when we use the phrase intergenerational. Not so much specifically about the youth, but about bringing people together from different generational cohorts, because there are more stories to be shared and more to be learned when there's diversity of age.
Well, I certainly agree. I applaud that, but when we're listening, accompanying it, listening in the neighborhood, are we trying to listen mostly to young adults or just whoever turns up? It's not a critical question. I'm disturbed by the emphasis on young adults because I don't think in practice what we're doing is focused on young adults.
Yeah, I don't think we want to focus on young adults. I think the idea of the grant from the Lilly Endowment was to focus on young adults. And then the Riverside Innovation Hub took that question and said, why are young adults joining the churches where they already are? They looked at those churches where they have a high young adult population. And then they said, you know, these young adults are joining these churches and staying there because they create a community. They engage with their surrounding neighborhood and they have an intergenerational community going. And that's what young adults want. They want to be part of a community, and they want to be part of a community that engages with their neighborhood. And then they said, okay, now we're going to teach you how to engage with your neighborhood. So, you know, very, very indirectly is there something related to young adults. But for us, we kind of wanted to throw that out of our mind and not have that be the focus. I mean, you know, you always want young people to come to church because there's no future without young people in church. But I think just focusing on young people coming to church can then have the opposite effect.
I had a question about accompaniment, and at what point, if ever, do you say that you're representing Peacecraft or our particular Saints Luke and James parish?
Sometimes I think it's okay to say that as like this is why I'm interested in the community. This is my connection to the community. But yeah, I mean, in general, like we don't want to talk about ourselves that much at all and try to make the whole focus of the conversation on them.
We
Cliff?
are at about 3 to 4 minutes after noon. Do people want to hang around and chat some more? It's officially time for us to say farewell.
This is Rosemary, and I would just encourage you to look at a note that Cliff left in the chat, please, about a wonderful experience that we had at St. James in 2017, where we had hundreds of people on our front porch. And there was a lot of work that went into that. And if you have, that could be another thing for us to talk about. Larry's also posted the times that we meet, and we are currently still meeting on Zoom. So if you're interested in meeting with us, you can connect to any of us. This would be Fiona, Larry, Sheila, Tom, Kathy Gear, Gretchen, or myself, if you would like to get connected, and we can send you the link to the Zoom meeting.
Okay. Shall that be the last word? Okay.
It's just a visual collage.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good discussion.
Good discussion and great dreams. Wow.
And I just want to say, I'm going to be in touch with you all about any of the creation care ideas that came out of Joanna's and my involvement with the MNIPL program about I'll be in touch with you to see if you want to partner with any of those things. We had talked about the rain garden, and you had some anyway.
I also just wanted to quickly say that Mary McKelvey's doing tons of accompaniment work, and that had sort of an interesting interconnection when you talked about the issue of encampment, because that was just kind of like you're out there listening and learning, and we had that experience. So I feel like that's a great example of how dynamic the accompaniment work can be.
Okay. Thank you all, Peacecraft.
Thank you.
Team very much. And thank you for challenging me to get more involved.